Tonight on Discovering, we're talking turkey. We'll go over guns, ammo, calls, decoys, and more. And we'll take a closer look at what you need to do to make sure your gun is clean and ready. Stick around, it's time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Shine up the shotgun, dust off the decoys, and clean up the calls. Turkey season is right around the corner. I met with longtime turkey hunter Randy Christensen to go over some of the equipment and tactics necessary for a successful hunt.
So one of the big things I'm doing early part of the season is locating, finding birds so I know where to go on my opening day. Getting a bird to shock gobble, you're not using your turkey call to be able to do that, but you're using a variety of sounds. Most of them are just going to be very abrupt, loud sounds. This is a reeded owl call. This one here is a short reed goose call. So we got a lot of birds, geese flying around, anything else, or sandhill cranes does both of them on here. And most of these you don't want to blow a lot of a call, you're just trying to get that noise to go off. And then you're listening for that gobble after each of them. There again, everybody kind of does with the crow call. Point of all this is just to locate a bird. I always say it's like scaring the hiccups out of somebody. You're getting that sharp sound. I mean, you can hear it after everything. I've heard it off slamming the truck door at different times and getting through spots, but anything that'll do that. This is going to be something odd. This is a peacock call. Not that there's much for a peacock, but it's just that sound, so it doesn't have to be always what's in the area. Of course, it works best first thing in the morning. Also roosting at night when you go to put that bird to bed, and you're just trying to get down that location of where those birds are, first thing in the morning before you get out there so you have an idea where to set. Looking at guns to use, I have a dedicated turkey gun that I've been shooting now for 25 years. It was built for turkey and turkey alone. Setup is a very short barreled. I do the scope thing on here. Helps a lot with the kids when I got kids or somebody new starting out, because I got a circle inside that scope that's put on the bottom of the bird's neck, and that's a squeeze the trigger. Range out there you got probably to about 40, maybe 45 yards at the most with the shells and stuff I use. I tend to get them a lot closer than that. Just another example of a different turkey gun, set up a little different, longer barrel, still got the extended choke. Really, anything in a gun that you can get to get your range, all you really need to be able to do. So the reason you're aiming here, and this is the point to where the feathers meet the skin on the bird's neck, is just that, the motion of a turkey. So when he's walking, if you are actually aiming at the head, this part is moving, the bottom of the neck is not. Your pattern will spread out to cover the rest of that. So if you're just starting to sight in, you're going to be in there maybe 10 yards. Now we're doing this with the scope, but you just got to realize you get a bird in that close, you need to be right on the money. Your pattern is not wide enough to cover much. So what we started with here was a 7/8 trap load, a lot lighter, not a turkey load. There's going to be a lot of difference between those and the punch that shell has. So difference here, we are shooting a turkey load, 2-ounce load that's shooting 11.25.
Another place you'll notice the difference in the shells you choose is in the recoil. Ow, that hurts.
So I got a number of decoys out here. Usually in the early season, you're still dealing with winter groups of birds coming in. I will have a strutter out most of the time. A lot of people stay away from that. I have great luck with that. Difference, big piece with this is having this white head on the bird, which is more breeding, where the red head is a fighting. You can get a lot of birds in just off of that because his interest is only that hen on the ground. Set up as a backup, I'll have jakes out here. I'll have my upright or feeding hen in the background. The birds that way gives you a little bit of what's going on. You don't want all the same body type, all the heads up. That looks like danger to birds. So you want a bunch of different configurations between that. I kind of keep everything spaced. I always say I want elbow room between my decoys. When you're seeing that with birds, if they ever start to group together, that's birds that are going to run, going to fly, going to go. I want space between them while they're feeding and picking and moving around. So there's times when I'm using decoys basically out in a field. Birds come in and expect to see those birds they've been hearing. When I get in the timber, more on my run and gun hunts, I usually will not have a decoy out with me. That Tom comes in and he's looking for a hen. He just keeps on moving and looking. A little bit of a different setup that way. So some of the difference there, in my early sets, I'll have a lot more decoys set out. By the time I get to the late seasons, end of the seasons, it might be where I just have one, my feeding hen or the jake along with it. Birds have been on the nest, so they're back and forth, and really they're getting off that nest, feeding, and they're back to it. Toms are trying to find those lone hens when they can find them. So if a guy's into bow hunting turkeys, one thing you want to do is, if you have a breeding hen down on the ground like this, you want her set to you because Tom will come in and he'll walk right to her back to get up onto breeder. We've actually taken birds off the top of the back of the decoy. Bunch of different calls that you use actually as a turkey call between slate calls, box calls, diaphragm calls. They all kind of got their place. Everything is a little different with them. Of course, with these, when you get into a box or a slate call like this, you always have motion. There's going to be a point, unless you have somebody else with you, where that call's got to go down, and that's when you get into using like a diaphragm call. Slate call like this, there's a bunch of different versions, motions that I use to be able to do those calls, but just your plain yelps, purrs, clucks, anything that you run on here. Yelp, get to a purr on here. Little cluck at the end of it. When a hen's most excited, it's her cut. Young bird of the year, and you'll still hear this, is a kiki, and that's more of a whistling sound. And I went right into a kiki run, which is that yelp at the end of it. You think of two Toms fighting with each other, you're going to hear that purr, but in a fighting purr, it's a lot more aggressive of a sound. And then you could always do first thing in the morning when the hen pitches down out of a tree, your fly down cackle. There's all different times to use those calls. A lot of times if you're hearing hens, mimic what she's doing, and I always just add in a little bit more. So when she's yelping 2-3 notes, I yelp back 5-7 notes. So it's just getting her to go. Sometimes you're working in that hen to drag a gobbler with her. Calling to a Tom can be a lot of different things. If he's hot, I call hot to him. If he's kind of slow, I back my calling off just to match with what they're doing. So the next thing we'll talk into is your diaphragm calls. Basically, this sits up into the roof of your mouth. There is a certain way to put these in. Some of them have, like this, has a little bump on here to locate where that's going to run in your mouth. I trim mine down to fit the palate, the shape of my mouth. Easy to carry. You know, I got a half a dozen different diaphragm calls in here, and everything gives you a different clear, different rasp. Any call that I can run there, I can also run here. That diaphragm is going to sit to the roof, and it's a matter of bringing air over your tongue and the pressure that you're putting on there against that reed, either flat or to the tip of your tongue pushing up into it. Best thing for a teacher is a wild hen. She's going to teach you all the different sounds, the calls. Anytime you can hear that and mimic it, that's your best hen on this. Little other thing I can do with this that I can't do with any other call really. Being able to do a gobble is a challenge. Sometimes it pushes birds away and other times it brings them in. It's just like any of it. None of it's a given. So one thing you notice, I don't have a box call here. Used to use one. I actually used to have quite a few different calls that I don't carry with me anymore. That box call is very simple, very easy to use for most people, and it's just closing the lid to be able to do that. Over the years, I've trimmed down what I carry, and actually this is now everything I use to kill turkeys. Trimmed out everything that I don't use and kind of got about a dozen different calls when you think about it. I got 2 different slates and a glass call, 3 different strikers, and a half a dozen diaphragms. So I got 12 different calls with me out there. There are some times when I do a real quick run and gun, and if I don't even grab this, if anybody's ever thought of that one, that's can koozie. I have 2 strikers in there and my glass call. There's times when you are just going to pick up and go. If you're chasing a bird and trying to get there to him, it's a real easy way to go, and it's fast. Hold your call real fast.
When you shoot a gun, it's going to get dirty. I stopped in at UP Hunter's Gunsmithing for a lesson on cleaning a shotgun.
When you're ready to go out for your turkey season or your bird season, whatever, you should have your bore cleaned on your shotgun. Most people would just use ordinary bore solvent you would use in your rifle. But that doesn't do an adequate job on shotguns, because every time you shoot a shotgun shell down there, they've got a wad in them, a plastic wad, that then deposits a little bit of plastic in the end of your barrel near the choke area where it constricts down. So you need to get that out of there, as well as the burned powder and so forth that you get from the normal ignition of your shotgun shell. Normal bore solvent does not dissolve that, but there is a product called shotgun wad solvent, of all things, that does a very good job on cleaning that out. If you don't clean it out, your bore keeps constricting, because every time you shoot, a little bit of plastic is deposited, and eventually your choke will, if you don't ever do it, clean it out of there, you'll actually go from, you thought what you had was a modified choke, down to a full choke. Always take the barrel off the shotgun in order to clean it. And always clean from the breech end. Don't try to do it from the muzzle end. For those of you who saw a segment we did some time back on cleaning rifle, we talked about using jags instead of loops. All these little loops that you get, whether it be for rifles or shotgun cleaning, you can take those and just throw them away. What you want to use instead of those loops that came with the cleaning kits is a jag. This one is for a 12 gauge shotgun. Choose an appropriate size patch. I highly recommend using some nitrile gloves, because the shotgun wad solvent, it's rather odoriferous, and if you get it on your hands, you're going to smell it for at least a day. Wet your patch, get it well soaked. Now when you get to the choke area, this one is a turkey choke, so it's even tighter than a full choke. You're going to have to bump it a little bit to get it to come out. You can see on the patch the blackness, and you can even see a little bit of the plastic that's coming out already. Normally, I would let that sit for a few minutes and then come back and run a clean dry patch through. You can see some of the plastic that's already coming out of there. Now use a bronze brush. You can see some of the pieces of plastic that are on there already just from this one. Anyway, do that 10 cycles. In addition to constricting the choke some, it can also affect the point of impact because the plastic is not deposited evenly around the choke area. So that can also affect the performance of your shotgun. Now back to a clean dry patch. Back to a wet patch. Less and less real black plastic is coming out of that choke area, so we're getting there. You can hear the barrel starting to squeak as that jag and patch runs down the bore. That's an indication that we're getting good and squeaky clean. Dry patch. Okay, good. The amount of plastic that we removed from the bore of this particular shotgun is after about 1 box of shells. So you don't want to do this every 5 years. You want to do this each time when you clean the firearm. This barrel has been dipped in a coating, and so you don't have to worry about what I'm going to show you next on this other barrel. You want to clean it off, but you don't have to treat it with anything. Do not take the choke tube out before you clean it, because if you do, then all of your dirt and foobarb and funderol, as we call it in the trade, will plug up the threads. After you've cleaned your bore, it's a good idea to periodically remove your choke tube. These threads are real fine, and if there's any moisture has gotten in there at all, or it hasn't been taken out in a long time, it can just freeze in place. So you want to take it out, clean it up good with a wire brush, clean up your threads real good, then treat it with an anti-seize product. Never Seize, there's a bunch of them out there. Loctite makes a brand of it. Just need a little bit on the thread area of the choke tube when you're out on a bird hunt, and then you're going to go turkey hunting and you need a different choke tube. You're not going to get surprised and not be able to get it out. Just like you never clean a shotgun with the choke tube out, never ever fire one with the choke tube out either, because you'll damage those threads. Now you don't have to put a wrench on this and tighten it wrench tight. Once it gets there, just a little bit. You don't want to over tighten it. Now before you reassemble your shotgun, you want to clean off all the outer surfaces of the barrel as well. And then I highly recommend that you treat it with an anti-rust product. This is the one that I've been using for years. It's an old product. It was developed by Boeing Aircraft. It began its commercial life but it's been discovered that it is a tremendously good rust preventative. So take a good sized cleaning patch, saturate it well, and then wipe down the entire outer surface. And you would also want to do this on the receiver of your shotgun after you've cleaned that, and put on a good heavy coat of it. After it's dried overnight, then just take an old t-shirt, take off any excess, put your gun back together, and you're good to go. The rain will all beat up beautifully on this surface now. Go back home at the end of your hunt, leave your case open to dry out the inside of your case, pull the barrel off the gun, expose everything, wipe it down, let it dry overnight. You do not necessarily have to treat it again. You can do that for a whole season, put it back together the next morning and go hunt again. And then at the end of the season, before you store it for the off season, your gun is protected again by doing this same process before you store it for the winter.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.